So, Lamont, I noticed that you said that you're Mexican,
Yes,
right? But you're also African American.
that's correct.
Father African American,
Yep.
or so was he present in your upbringing?
He was. The craziest thing is I've been blessed because, well, blessed and unblessed. My father ended up passing away when I was about 5 years old. Sorry about that, 8 years old.
Okay, sorry to hear that.
But at the time, him and my mom were separated, and the man that she was with ended up becoming my father as well, who is also black.
Okay,
And, it's like I went from one father to the other, but they were always present. They were always there. And they were both great men because I just lost my stepfather about a year ago as well.
really, I'm sorry to hear that as
So,
well.
it's life, and, the cool thing, if anything, I could say is cool about it, losing my dad at such a young age was that it taught me how to realize that, life is going to hit you and it's going to hit you hard. And you can't let those hits hold you back. Like you still got to keep moving forward. And, and it was tough, being half black and half Mexican and growing up around the Mexican side of my family, not the black side, and then not having a father. But I also had a father there at the same time. So there was a lot of trying to figure out who I was and what I was doing and where I was going. But, I think adversity to me is one of the most beautiful things because it kind of shows you who you are and it makes you who you are. So.
Wow, yeah, pressure makes diamonds, and the timeline on that, is different for everyone.
It is.
Right? So, if you think about a couple of generations black, and I'm speaking specifically about our African American side, right? My family has history in sharecropping and slavery,
Yep.
right? Which is something that I don't think we talk a whole lot about here in Hawaii as black people, but it's important to not forget who your ancestors
Yep.
are and what they went through. And when you look at the ability that we have in our current society to be successful and to forge our own path, I feel like what you're doing right now, what I'm doing right now, definitely is making our ancestors proud. They were a lot less fortunate and went through a lot more challenges that we went through. Of course, there's some generational stuff and some residual from that, but it's not holding us back.
Exactly.
And I just want to give you props and your flowers for that, man, because you're showing the other brown kids, right? And it's not limited to just brown people, but the struggles that brown people and the oppressed have went through generations. It's important to see that in our current society, we can flourish and we can forge our own path. What does it mean to you to be black?
I mean, it means the world to me, man. My mom, being that my father passed away when I was 5 years old or 8 years old, she tells those stories because his family lived in Lubbock, Texas, and we were in El Paso, Texas. So they used to drive up to Lubbock every once in a while. And my mom would tell us stories about when they passed through certain counties, he would have to get in the trunk of the car because he was black. And my mom's Mexican, but she's really fair, so she looks white, if she's just driving by. So, she would tell us stories where he'd have to get in the trunk of the car, and then they would, pass, and then he would get out, and then they would go through other black communities where she would have to get in the trunk of the car because they didn't like white people there, even though she wasn't white,
Wow.
So these are the kind of stories that I grew up with, and I'm slowly telling my kids about it because my wife is white.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So my kids are, they're white, Mexican, and black. So they need to figure it all out too, and they need to hear all the truth and all the stories. So my daughter's 14, my son's 11, so I'm now slowly, interjecting all these stories that I was told to them so they could see what it's like to be black and know what it's like to be black. And, and then going to my stepfather who just passed, he was from Minden, Louisiana. And, we always hear that whole thing, like, how come black people call black people the N-word and nobody else can? I've always tried to refrain from that because my stepfather, being from Minden, Louisiana, and, it's the South and stuff like that, he never used that word. And one day he sat me down and I asked him, why have you never used it? He was like, well, because I would be doing my mom and my grandparents and my great-grandparents a disrespect because of what they had to go through. So I look at that now and I think about that, and I don't use the word, and and that's what it is. It's not about it being a social thing or cool or anything like that. It's about paying homage to our ancestors and the respect, because we are who we are because of them and what they went through. So I can't forget that, and that's kind of how I uphold it as well.
Wow. I love that perspective. Being here in Hawaii is a little interesting. I grew up with my father. He was alive for the first half of my life. Actually, a little bit more than 3/4 of my life. My father was alive, and I wasn't really close with him. He left when I was 3, so I think that I grew up with a local mindset, surrounded by a Japanese ohana in Hawaii, and I was always on a quest to understand what it meant to be Black in Hawaii. And I would ask older Black people for advice, and I'd get similar answers, and it would come down to us being a minority, the struggles and whatnot. But slavery and Africans coming to America in the way that they did is not the total story of Black people.
Exactly.
But that's what we're taught, right?
Yep.
Because that was like a starting point. We went through struggles. We were enslaved and came over on ships. Spanish, everybody brought us over, and we went through a lot of struggles. And then now we're in a position where we have the opportunity to thrive. But the Black experience goes further back. Yes. And it goes back to the motherland. It goes back to successful Black people, successful Black sailors. I know that there are Black nautical, sailors that would, navigate the globe as well. For what I'm finding out, there's a lot of Black history that we're not necessarily taught in America.
Yes.
Correct?
Yeah, and I think it's for a reason.
Yeah.
But what I'm telling my kids now is just know who you are, be true to yourself, and don't worry about all that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no sense in holding on to the past. Mm-hmm. There's no sense in being bitter. Mm-hmm. It's like you are in control of you, and that's what you should focus on. My father that passed away, my biological father, his last name was actually McChristian, but he was raised by his grandmother, who her parents, if I get the story right, her parents were runaway slaves, and their slave name was Brown, and her name was Brown. Her last name was Brown. So because she raised him more so than his mother did, when he was old enough, he changed his last name to Brown. So my last name is actually a slave-given name, if I get the story right. But
okay.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I remember it. So, it's like there's no sense in holding on to the past, but you got to hold that past in you, and make the best out of it. And just like you said, we got to show and do right by our ancestors.
Yes.
So.
Yes, and never forget, really. And I think that the modern Hawaiians go through something similar.
Definitely.
Where their land was taken over, and their language, they tried to abolish the language and the culture, the dance. They rerouted their water systems and dried up their ahupua'as and said this is the new norm, right? And then a couple generations later, there are a lot of Hawaiians that have just kind of accepted it or for forgetting about that delicate history that's sometimes hard to talk about, especially when you're in modern American culture, and we literally live with all of the modern American luxuries, right? There's sometimes the argument of, well, if you're so Hawaiian, you like Hawaii, go back to Hawaii, ancient Hawaii, then why are you filling up gas and driving in Chevy, But the reality is that it's still an important subject to talk about, just like ancient African American history, just like Native American history. But look at where we are now, and how do we make our ancestors proud by thriving with respecting what happened.
Yeah.
Right?
We can't change the past, but we could change the future.
There you go.
You know what I'm saying? So